So hello to everybody joining us, and we figure people will trickle in along the way. But we are going to have a conversation about, so CAWP earlier this week, we put out a report called Measuring Success, Women in 2020 Legislative Elections, and tried to pile in as much information as we could about what happened for women at the legislative level in 2020. And in doing so, relied heavily on the expertise and work of people like Julie Conway. And so we thought we'd take this opportunity to also get online, have a conversation, and share this after this, because we know some people work on Friday afternoons. I don't, it's overrated. Different.
Fridays are different.
But to draw on your expertise, perspective of what happened. So what I first want to make sure we have is a little bit of a background and bio on Julie. Uh-oh, are you frozen, Julie?
You are frozen to me. I'm
okay, but can you hear me?
I can hear you.
As long as you can hear me, that's fine. If the video's a little goofy, we'll fix it later. So Julie is the executive director of VIEW PAC, Values and Electing Women PAC. And I thought actually, Julie, it would make more sense for you to just tell us a little bit about VIEW PAC, and then we can sort of dig in.
Yeah, absolutely. So VIEW PAC has been around since 1997. We have one singular mission, and that is to help elect Republican women on the federal level, so to the House and the Senate. We have no litmus test. We believe that the women should look like the district or the state that they're running in. Obviously, that leads to electability, which is the most important thing. We've been doing this for a long time. We are officially the unofficial political arm of all the Republican women in the House and the Senate.
Yeah. And you've been since 1997, right?
Yeah, and so we originally started as more of a networking group for women along with the Republican women that were serving in the House at the time. There weren't many of them, and so there seemed to be a need for this kind of a support network. And then over the last decade, we've gotten a lot more focused on actually going out and trying to support women when they needed it as early as possible in a primary. Everybody talked about why don't we have more Republican women in the U.S. House, and the math actually was very simple. It wasn't until the last couple of years that everybody else had this epiphany that we have to help Republican women in primaries, because if they primary, they can't win the general, as it turns out.
Yeah, I mean, that's the piece that, and I hope it came out in what we wrote in the report, but this piece about, Julie and I have talked before about, like, this is not new. You've been doing this work on the Republican side for a long time. It's just that support infrastructure hasn't grown significantly in addition to you.
Yeah, funny, there have been fits and starts over the last decade. There are a lot of good organizations out there trying to support Republican women. It's just been more difficult to coordinate and to work together. I think a number of us did a much better job at that this cycle, which is part of the reason for our success. And we've been working on that for the last couple of cycles. So, a lot of people ask why all the success in 2020. Time. A lot of people think that it just, crept up overnight, and that's certainly not true.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, and let's start with 2018, right? Because one of the cases we make in this report is that the 2020 story is sort of in the context of 2018, that these two should be taken into consideration together when we think about the story of women's gains or successes. So just for context, right, 2018, record year for women. There's all these stories about women's surge, pink wave, all of this, which I do want to talk to you about because that's part of the contrast of this year, how many stories and things are out there, and why there might be less this year. But gains were concentrated in 2018 among Democratic women, and losses were significant among Republican women, especially in the House, right? Going from 23 to 13. And it led to some of those stories, and at least women like Elise Stefanik, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, to publicly say this is a crisis in Republican women's representation. So as somebody who'd been working in this area for decades, how did you view the 2018 results? And what did you think needed to happen to see the rebound we ultimately did see in 2020?
Well, I'll start with the obvious. Talking about this in 2021 after 2020 is about 19 times more fun than it was in 2018.
Yeah.
You mentioned that we lost a lot of Republican women in 2018. And while that's true, I think a lot of people forget that, women ran for other offices and they left the House voluntarily. It wasn't just losing on election day. Kristi Noem for governor, Diane Black for governor of Tennessee, Martha McSally ran over to run in the Senate. And so that accounts for some of those losses. But as you know, that's not really the point of this conversation. The point is the Democratic women were exceptionally successful in 2018. And we only elected one Republican woman, one freshman, Carol Miller from West Virginia. And so, yeah, there was a little bit of licking of the wounds coming out of 2018. And we needed to figure out, what are we going to do? And so, it was really the perfect storm. And a lot of things went into it. It wasn't one single factor. It was, as we just talked about, the foundation that had been being built. We also had tremendous candidates. And more, even just as important, if not more important, is that there were winnable seats. The playing field had changed. The seats that a lot of the Democrats had picked up in 2018, the easiest time to take out an incumbent is when he or she is a freshman. And so we had more targets. The other thing that is a little bit strange to talk about, and a lot of people don't think of it, is how actually COVID was a great advantage to women overall. But for the Republican women, women tend to be more compassionate. They tend to listen more. And during this time of panic and worrying about the kids in school and the crime in the cities and everything that was going on, wanting their families to be safe and financially secure, the Republican women just tend to lean in on those issues. And during this crisis that everybody was dealing with, it wasn't just a natural disaster in one part of the country. It was unified. Everybody was in the fight together. And so the one other thing that's really important about 2020 is that we, the Republicans, flipped 14 seats from Democrat to Republican. 11 of those 14 were Republican women. Every single one of those Republican women had one or two things in common, which was they had all served in office previously, whether it was lieutenant governor or the state senate or a mayor, or they had run before. And so when you come back and do it again, you don't make the same mistakes you made the first time you ran. And it's really hard to run for federal office. And so, again, all of those factors combined really led to the success. And then just finally, because the point about the primaries, historically, we couldn't get Republican women out of Republican primaries. Well, part of that is because historically, Republican women, no matter what their background, no matter what their policy positions are, were always considered less conservative than the guys. And so that was nearly impossible to get them out of the primary where the base decides who the candidate is going to be. And so this cycle, when we got women out of the primaries, it allowed them to pick up some of those middle votes, whether they were conservative Democrats or the independents, that had guys been nominated, we wouldn't have won those seats. I mean, there's no question in my mind that we would not have picked up as many seats as we did. So again, all of those things combined really led to our success.
Yeah, and because that was something, and I kept saying, I'm not a good prognosticator, so it could just be me. But certainly early in the cycle, a lot of these districts that these women won were not at all favored. Some of them weren't even toss-ups. They were lean Democrat, or even if you look at Cook or something like that. So to your point, so part of it is the candidate that wins the primary might change those calculations. And obviously the political context was changing, COVID, all these other dynamics. Is there anything else? Did you see that change? Like, did you see the prospects look up as the
No, no,
cycle
absolutely.
unfolds.
But you also understand, I live and breathe this. This is
Yeah.
all I do. And so,
Yeah.
I knew exactly where things were trending up and not really trending the way we needed to. The timing worked in a lot of these races, the sort of the staggering of the primaries,
Sure.
and the way a lot of people forget, because of COVID, a lot of the primary dates changed. And so there were just a lot of factors that came into play. Again, the perfect storm. And I never like to be, Debbie Downer about this, but we're already first quarter, 2021, looking at 2022. And so as successful as we were, and you look at these 11 flip seats, naturally, those are the #1 seats on the Democrat list to take out, not because they're Republican women, but because those are the most competitive seats. And so, as we work as a party to get the majority back in the House and the Senate, we know it's going to be on the backs of the Republican women. We've known that for the last couple of cycles, that this is how we grow the party. And so they're going to be the #1. We have to protect them before we go out and start working with new candidates in winnable seats. I know we left some women on the field last cycle that, had we had more resources, they would have won. And there were some women that lost in primaries that, had they been the candidate, I think they would have won. And so, as great as we did, I always go back and look at the ones we lost. Like, why weren't we able to get them over the line? And so, we're going to have a huge focus on that. And it's a big deal. Now that we have 31 in the House with the addition of Julia Letlow in Louisiana last week, and hopefully on May 1st, we'll add Susan Wright out of Texas 6, we'll have 32 women in the House. And so that's great. Unfortunately, it's a 2-year term, as everyone knows. And so, we're back at it. And it is exciting. And I've had a ton of candidates reach out to me already who want to run in 2022. And one of the best things about the candidates I've talked to, most of them are looking at running in seats that are winnable. If you squint with a good tailwind and they're good candidates, we've got a chance. And now, finally, there's so many more people believing in this and realizing that, the party has to look more like the country. And, we certainly do now, and for me, a lot of it has been quality over quantity. I mean, we need numbers, right? But our women are so solid. And nobody, it's interesting. Everybody's talking about all the freshmen that were elected, which is tremendous. But nobody talks about our 11 non-freshmen and their positions of power currently. We've got Liz Cheney, obviously conference chair, Kathy McMorris Rodgers ranking on energy and commerce, Kay Granger ranking on appropriations, Virginia Fox ranking on ed and labor, Jackie Leworski ranking on ethics, and Carol Miller as recruitment chair of the NRCC again. And so when you think about all of the Republicans in the House, when we win and we get the gavels back, we're going to have 4 women chairing a couple of the most important committees in the House. And so, all of this is good because we've got great mentors for our freshmen. Everybody's excited about this. And because the gap is so narrow with the balance of power, people are going to be looking everywhere to see where we can pick up seats. And so it's exciting. I'm super excited about, the women that we elected and our prospects for getting the House back in 2022 on the strength, again, of the women.
Yeah, no, this is a great point. This vulnerability point we made in the report, I just tweeted about it too, this important point that it was also true for Democrats, right? So in 2018, and we looked into this because we had been asked, I'm sure you had been asked, are the Republicans targeting women, qua women? Is it, if they're getting women to target women? And the numbers don't bear that out. You know the backstory better than I do. But they certainly, they were losing in large part because they were in these most vulnerable districts. So the 5 Democratic incumbents who lost, women who lost in this cycle, 4 of them lost to Republican women. But again, in these seats that could go back and forth depending on the nature of the cycle. So that's one of those important things to look for as we look ahead. You mentioned Carol Miller being recruitment chair. This is notable because you have Elise Stefanik in 2018 as the recruitment chair, NRCC.
Right.
2020, Susan Brooks, another woman. And now you have Carol Miller. And I do want to ask you if you think that sort of matters in regard to prioritization of women in recruitment.
Yes, a million percent, you know, and it's not because all of a sudden magically there were more women running. It was that we really paid attention to the women that could win these seats. And it wasn't, you know, I'm not suggesting this happened all the time in the past, but if there was a self-funder, generally a guy 9 times out of 10 that said, hey, you know, I'm going to run down here, or he's the, you know, president of the state Senate, you know, okay, well, you're the guy. Well, you know, women learned that, you know, we don't have to wait our turn, you know, even though there's 10 guys in the state legislature that's been waiting to run in the seat, it doesn't mean you shouldn't if you're the best candidate. You know, VIEW PAC, we don't support all Republican women. We support the good ones. And I don't spend time in districts where the woman could be fantastic, but if it's a D+18, D+20, it's not helpful. And that's why when we talked about, you know, all the numbers, like for the first year and a half, the first, you know, 2019 into 2020, it was all about the numbers, you know, the number of Republican women that registered to run, which was terrific. I was just worried that that was going to be the narrative when we only elected 15, right? And so what people forget is that every cycle, you know, it might be different coming out of redistricting, but every cycle for at least the last 10 years, there's only ever 35, maybe 40 if you stretch it, competitive seats. And so the playing field is very, very small. And so you need to be much more strategic in your candidates. And if you, you know, continue to elect guys in the primary that can't win in November, it doesn't matter, you know? So we made a big focus on that.
Yeah. No, and I think that's important. And I think this story as well of like, so you have the recruitment chairs, they play an important role. You know, I just want to give kudos again to VIEW PAC and the work that you've been doing, because I do think a lot of times, and especially on the Republican side, but on the Democratic side too, by the way, right? It is often these organizations and advocates, activists, whatever, you know, outside or adjacent to the party. That are providing the space and encouragement and support for women that doesn't always come directly from the party. I mean, I think after the election, everybody wants to take credit. You know, like, so like I saw a couple comments from the NRCC chair, and there is credit to be given. I mean, the NRCC funded these women at the end, and they, you know, that certainly probably helped. But I think my perspective is that early on support is really important from organizations like yours, Winning for Women, the sort of cadre of organizations that you've already, you know, alluded to that provide this network.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, you mentioned Winning for Women. You know, we worked hand in glove last cycle, which also was different. You know, we have sort of, you know, we have the same goals, but our silos were a little different, you know, where our strengths are, where their strengths are. But when we can work together, you know, that helps us to be successful. And you know, to the NRCC, you know, I don't, look, everybody should take credit. You know, I don't care about the credit. The women are serving in the U.S. House, so
that's what matters,
I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter to me. I'm looking down the line, you know, how to keep them and how to get more. You know, that's my thing. But for the NRCC, historically, they actually don't play in primaries. You know, once in a while, there's a secret handshake and a wink and a nod, staying out. But you know, so outside organizations like VIEW PAC, you know, we need to get in and showcase the strong women and make sure they are seen. And so, you know, ironically, last cycle, when I talked about a number of women who we could have added to our numbers and we lost them, it was almost like we had too many women for people to focus on, right? You know, trying to spread their resources across, and obviously not complaining about that. It ended up great. But those other women, had they been the only 7 running, they would have gotten all the help and they probably would have won. And so, you know, as we become more successful in electing Republican women, we need to have more focus from the donors, from the national donors, really working on keeping them and electing more. And both Winning for Women and VIEW PAC, we both have soft dollar components. We're both building them up. We're both identifying great candidates. We're exchanging notes on who the best ones are, where are we going to focus, and you know, we can do that. And you know, the party, you know, we can't talk to the, about stuff and the party can't do certain things, but we can. And so, we need to take advantage of that. And really, I like to joke that, we were doing this before it was cool, right? And so there are a lot of guys, obviously we talk about the Republican women, but there are a lot of male members that totally get this.
Right.
It's a little self-serving for some of them. Well, yeah, because they want to be in the majority and they get the joke all of a sudden, right? Like all of a sudden, this isn't just about Republican women. It's about those Republican women are the only ones that are going to get us that seat. And so all of a sudden there's more energy there as well. So yeah, it was a hell of a cycle. And I think that we can carry on the momentum.
Yeah. So I want to be cognizant of your time because I only asked for 20 minutes of your time, but I do want to ask you this question, which is measuring success, right? That's the report title. But I spent a lot of time thinking about this too, because at CAWP, we count all the numbers, but I really think it's important we measure success beyond those numbers. And you've already alluded to that in like quality, right? That we need to think about where these and the power that these women have, right? Beyond the numbers. But are there other ways for you? How do you measure success for women in politics, in American politics generally, or just for VIEW PAC in ways that maybe go beyond some of those basic numbers of how many won or lost?
Well, I think I have two comments on that. One is that we're always striving for parity. I think, as I alluded to before, Congress does not look like America, and we need to keep trying, both the Republicans and the Democrats. We're in this together in terms of trying to achieve that diversity and parity, which I think is critically important. And that actually was one of the downsides, not to make it more important than the victories, but I hate that a lot of our really good women took out good Democratic women. I don't want them to become the girl seats, right? Because that doesn't help. That doesn't add numbers. I joke, I'd much rather take out the old white Democrat guy, and replace with somebody else that is more diverse in Republican women. But the other thing that was different this cycle was that we were able to elect Republican women in safe seats. And so if we don't have to defend them, as much as we historically have, because they've won in these swing seats, I mean, that's huge for us. And that means that we were getting Republican women through conservative primaries. If it's an R+17 district and we get a woman out of that primary, we're doing a lot of things right. We have the right candidate, we have the right message, and the resources to win those seats. And now we don't have to worry about them. And she can, any of these congresswomen, they can govern, they can legislate instead of constantly running for office and trying to raise money. And for me, that's success. When we can have Republican women sitting at the table, adding their voice to the conversation and making the legislation that our country lives under. I mean, that's, for me, that's the success. And the 5 women I went through, the 6 women I went through, the non-freshmen that are in seats of power. I mean, that's success.
Right.
I mean, our Republican guys are probably like, there's so many of us. Why don't we have gavels? Well, it's because these women really work their asses up to get to where they are, and they deserve to be there. They are the best person for those jobs, and they worked hard. And women always have to work harder. It's part of the deal. But once you get used to that, then you have an edge, you have an advantage. You're never going to take it for granted. And so we just have to keep building on that and keep introducing the country and the districts to these incredibly strong, impressive, diverse women. And so, it doesn't become a thing every 2 years, and it's not shocking that we elected 19 women. Next cycle, let's elect 20 and let's have 51 in the House. And all of a sudden this becomes normal. And so that's the other goal, that's success when we're no longer having this conversation.
Yeah. If we could just get rid of year of the woman, year of the Democratic woman, year of the Republican woman, it's like the most annoying. Yeah.
Super annoying.
I'm with you. So this is the look ahead question. And also, is there sort of the space to tell people what they can do, So as we look to 2022, you've already given a little bit of prospects, what you're watching for, but what's sort of your early outlook for Republican women's opportunities and the work that VIEW PAC is going to be doing? And are there things that people can do to support Republican women, support organizations like VIEW PAC to make sure the momentum continues for Republican women?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it goes without saying, but success begets success. And so the more role models that are out there, the more examples that, wow, we are embracing smart women. You know, we're doing this. All of a sudden they have the resources that they hadn't had in the past. It encourages more people to run. And, you know, the more people we have running, obviously, the better. And so in terms of getting involved, sometimes I'm the worst fundraiser in America because I always, I don't push VIEW PAC, even though, www.viewpac.org.
I was just going to say, plug that address.
Yeah, right. At VIEW PAC on Twitter, at VIEW PAC and everything else. But that having been said, I always encourage women to get involved locally. You have to run for something, run for city council, run for, the board of some local charitable organization. You get involved. And if you don't think you're the one that needs to be the candidate, help other women that are running, whether it's stuffing envelopes or making calls or doing the grassroots. And now, again, we have a lot of Republican women in state legislatures across the country, so there's a lot more opportunity to get involved locally with Republican women. And there's, nobody will ever turn your help away. I promise you. And so, reach out. And there are lots of other organizations that are bipartisan, nonpartisan, that really help educate women about running for office and the ways to get involved and train, not just the candidate side, but on the operative side, and so we need more women in those jobs as well. So, that's what we just keep pushing.
Yeah. We're very good at CAWP at being sort of a wet blanket of like, look, the job's not done. Yes, we're going to celebrate, but women are still significantly underrepresented. So I'll put that hat on right now just to say, right, like we're going to keep pushing because the numbers are low and they're still not at parity among Democratic women or Democrats. They're not at parity among Republicans. And as you noted earlier, in order to get to parity, I think we all in this community say this, in order to get to parity, it has to happen on both sides of the aisle. So I just want to thank you for taking time and doing this experiment with us. And reminders to folks, viewpac.org, at ViewPAC for Twitter. And then also for our report, if you want to read more and dig in on the story of gender in the 2020 legislative elections, you can find that at womenrun.rutgers.edu/2020 report, but you can just go to the main address and you'll find it. And you might also want to dig into the 2018 report at that same address. And we'll be sharing your expertise around, Julie. So
well, thank you. And Kelly, thank you. You ladies are amazing. And you do such a tremendous job of elevating the importance of women in office. And you're just such a tremendous resource. And I love working with you. And now I know how to do the little Instagram-y.
Well, now we're just going to have these conversations on a regular basis.
Right.
So watch out. Now that we got it working. And next time we need the dog. I did tease that. Is your dog Porter?
He is Porter. Yeah.
So it's like Porter might show up.
Yeah, it's funny. Normally when I get on a Zoom or a call, that's when he wakes up and he stretches and he wants to go out and he starts talking. So, we are lucky this time, but next time I'll invite him.
Next time, and I'll get Debbie in on this so she can bring her dog in. I don't have a dog to share, but.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. The old saying in Washington, you want a friend, get a dog. And so, like, I live by it. I live all those cliches. That's what we do here. We're sound bites and talking points. So.
Well, thank you. We'll continue these conversations because I do think 2022 is going to be interesting.
It will indeed. Thanks, Kelly.
Have a good weekend. Thank you.
Bye.